It all started a little over 5 years ago when I found myself stuck in a dead-end job, living paycheck to paycheck. I had a decent role as a marketing assistant at a mid-sized company, but there was no growth, no excitement, and no real future. I felt like I was treading water in a pool that was slowly draining. I was in my late 20s, and it was becoming more and more apparent that I needed to make a change, but I had no clue where to begin. The idea for my business didn't come to me in a flash of inspiration. Instead, it was a gradual process that began with frustration. Like many of us, I spent my evenings scrolling through social media, comparing myself to others. I saw people traveling the world, living the dream, working on their own terms, and doing what they loved. At first, I thought they were lucky. But after some thought, I realized that these people weren't just lucky, they had taken risks, they had put in the work, and they had built something for themselves. I knew I had to try something different. So, I started small. At the time, I had a hobby of making custom t-shirts. I'd been doing it for fun, designing shirts with quirky phrases or graphics for my friends. People would ask me where I got them, and I'd casually mention I made them myself. One day, I got an idea. What if I started a side hustle selling t-shirts online? It wasn't the most groundbreaking idea, but it was something I could do with minimal upfront investment. I could print designs on demand, meaning I didn't need to buy inventory in bulk or worry about managing a stockpile. I began by researching how to set up an online store. I watched countless YouTube videos, read blogs, and subscribed to online courses. I chose Shopify as my platform and set up a basic store, which I could afford since they offered a 30-day free trial. I spent the first couple of weeks designing logos and creating t-shirt mock-ups. I picked a niche market, motivational quotes for young professionals, and tailored my designs to that audience. It wasn't a unique idea, but it was something I knew would resonate with people in my age group. The first couple of weeks were slow. I didn't make any sales, and there were days when I questioned whether this whole thing was a huge waste of time. But I refused to give up. I tweaked the website, played around with my designs, and kept posting on Instagram. I would take product photos in my living room, with makeshift backdrops, using my phone camera. Honestly, the quality wasn't great, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that I was learning and improving. Then, after about 3 weeks of zero sales, something incredible happened. A random person on Instagram, who I didn't know, bought one of my shirts. I was ecstatic. It was a small win, but it felt like I had unlocked the first step in what could be something bigger. I immediately packed the shirt and shipped it off, following up with a thank you message on Instagram. That customer left me a review, which brought in a couple more sales. Slowly but surely, the orders began trickling in. As the months went by, I realized that I was onto something. My designs were starting to get noticed, and I began experimenting with Facebook ads. I targeted my ads toward people interested in motivational content, entrepreneurship, and self-improvement. I had a small budget, but I put it into testing different ad creatives and refining my approach. Every time I got a sale, I would reinvest that money back into my marketing, and the snowball effect began. The more I tested, the more I learned what worked and what didn't. Around the 6-month mark, I had enough profit to quit my full-time job. I was still cautious, but I knew it was time. My side hustle had become something bigger than just a small experiment, and I could see the potential for it to grow into a real business. It wasn't easy at first. There were sleepless nights, moments of self-doubt, and tons of mistakes. But the freedom to work on my own terms was worth it. During the second year, I began expanding. I started adding new products, from hoodies to mugs, and even expanded my designs to cover a broader range of topics, everything from tech to lifestyle and humor. I also partnered with influencers in my niche to help promote my products. It wasn't a magic fix, but it did give me a boost. I also started building an email list, something I had neglected in the beginning. One of the turning points for my business came when I hired my first employee. I had reached a point where I could no longer juggle everything on my own. I hired someone to handle customer service and order fulfillment while I focused on growing the brand and developing new products. It was scary at first. Hiring someone meant spending money I wasn't used to, but it was a necessary investment that paid off. That decision led to the next big leap. I started focusing on scaling the business. I implemented systems for automating emails, setting up a loyalty program, and refining my ad strategy. I also reached out to more manufacturers to improve the quality of my products and broaden my supply chain. The goal was to create a brand that stood out for its quality, customer service, and unique designs. By the time I hit the 3-year mark, my business was generating a steady stream of revenue. I had fully transitioned out of my old job and was working on the business full-time. But even then, there were challenges. Competitors were popping up left and right, and I had to keep innovating to stay ahead of the curve. That's when I realized that the key to success was not just about the products I sold, but the story behind the brand. I began investing more time in building my brand's voice. I started a blog on my website, sharing stories about my entrepreneurial journey, lessons I learned along the way, and tips for other people looking to start their own businesses. I connected with my customers on a deeper level by sharing behind-the-scenes content on social media and engaging with them directly. I didn't want to just sell products. I wanted to build a community. By the fourth year, I had expanded my business into other markets, launching internationally. I also started getting media coverage, which was a huge boost. Major magazines and online publications began featuring my story, and my products were sold in boutique stores. With this increased visibility, my business grew exponentially. The brand was no longer just a t-shirt company, it had become a lifestyle brand that resonated with people from all walks of life. Fast forward to today, and I've built a seven-figure business. I've had my ups and downs, and there were moments when I seriously thought about giving up. But looking back, I wouldn't change a thing. The journey wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick, but it was incredibly rewarding. I'm no longer stuck in a job I hated, and I get to work on something I'm passionate about every single day. It's funny because at one point, I thought I had missed the boat. I thought I was too late, that everyone else had already figured it out. But that wasn't true. It's never too late to start. You just have to take that first step, no matter how small, and keep pushing forward. No one told me it would be easy, but every ounce of effort I put in was worth it. If I can do it, so can you. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I didn't plan to become an entrepreneur. It happened the way a fire might start in the woods, a spark, some dry leaves, and suddenly it's consuming everything. I was 27, working as a UX designer at a mid-sized SaaS company in Boston. It was a comfortable job, decent salary, stocked fridge, and I had finally stopped hating Mondays. But the itch was always there, the urge to build something that was mine. Not because I thought I was the next Jobs or Musk, but because I couldn't shake the feeling that I was wasting time helping someone else build their dream. The spark came during a lunch break. My coworker Sarah and I were talking about how hard it was to find good, affordable childcare in the city. She was on a 6-month wait list for a daycare near her place. Others on our team shared horror stories, unexpected closures, absurd prices, or just not knowing whether their kids were in a nurturing environment. That night, I did some Googling. The childcare industry was massive, over $60 billion in the US alone, but full of inefficiencies. Fragmented listings, outdated websites, minimal transparency. It felt like a Craigslist version of the most important service a parent might ever use. The idea? A platform that connected parents with vetted, high-quality childcare providers, in-home nannies, certified daycare centers, even part-time babysitters. Think Airbnb meets Care.com, but with a strong trust and verification component. Reviews, video tours, background checks, the works. I started small. Nights and weekends. I taught myself the basics of Python and Flask, sketched UI screens in Figma, and used my savings to hire a freelance developer in Poland to help me build a beta version. I called it Nanny Nest. The first version was garbage. Clunky interface, slow load times, and a sign-up flow that dropped half the users by page 3. But I managed to convince 5 daycare centers and 8 independent nannies in the Boston area to list their services. I ran Facebook ads targeting new parents and gave the providers free listings in exchange for feedback. The real breakthrough came from a mom named Tessa, who emailed me saying Nanny Nest helped her find a part-time nanny within 2 days. She said it saved her career, literally, because she was about to quit her job. I screenshotted that email and looked at it every time I felt like giving up, which was often. I soft-launched officially after 6 months, with about 40 providers on the platform. I handled everything: customer service, onboarding, moderation, even driving across town to help a provider upload a video tour of their place. Revenue? Almost nothing. I charged a small transaction fee when parents booked through the platform, but the volume was low. My savings were draining fast. I had about 3 months of runway left before I'd have to crawl back to a full-time job. Then came the Boston Tech Angels pitch event. I wasn't planning to go, but a friend forwarded me the link. It was a long shot, but I applied, made it to the final 10, and pitched in front of a room of semi-bored, suit-clad investors who'd heard it all before. I bombed half the questions, especially the one about scaling trust mechanisms, but 2 weeks later, I got an email from an angel investor named Mark who wanted to chat. He had 3 kids, had been through the nightmare of vetting childcare, and saw the potential. He offered $100K for 10% equity. I took it. With that, I quit my job and went full-time. I hired a full-stack dev, brought on a part-time customer success rep, and started building Nanny Nest 2.0. We focused hard on trust, background checks powered by Checker, in-person verification for daycare centers, and video interviews with every independent provider. Over the next year, we expanded to Chicago and Austin. Word of mouth started spreading. Parent forums, mommy bloggers, even some local news coverage. We crossed $10K MRR 14 months after I started. But it wasn't all smooth. One of our providers turned out to have lied on their background check. No criminal history, but several complaints filed privately that didn't show up. A parent found out and posted about it in a Facebook group. It nearly sank us. Trust was everything in our business. I personally called every affected parent, offered full refunds, and updated our policy to include a double-blind interview process with parents who'd used a provider before. It cost us time and money, but retention stayed solid. At 24 months in, we raised a seed round $750K from 2 reputable VC firms and several angels. We had 300-plus active providers, 8,000 parent users, and $38K MRR. We expanded into remote and hybrid nanny sharing models, where parents could split the cost of one provider and alternate homes. That feature alone added 25% to our revenue in 3 months. Then COVID hit. At first, it was panic. Parents canceled bookings en masse. Providers pulled out, worried about exposure. For 2 weeks, our revenue dropped 80%. I thought we were dead in the water, but we adapted. Fast. We pivoted to include emergency childcare for essential workers. We built a COVID safety badge system. Providers could show proof of vaccination, recent testing, and safety protocols. We partnered with a local PPE distributor and mailed kits to providers for free. Parents came back. Slowly, then in droves. We added a feature for virtual nannying, not great for infants, but surprisingly helpful for older kids doing remote schooling. That pivot kept us alive. Today, Nanny Nest has over 1,200 active providers in 17 cities. We hit $120K MRR last quarter. We're still not profitable, growth mode, as they say, but I'm no longer worried about keeping the lights on. I look back at that first clunky prototype, the email from Tessa, the near-death COVID quarter, and I'm honestly just grateful. Not just because we built something that works, but because it reminded me what entrepreneurship really is: controlled chaos, guided by conviction. I still don't know if we'll become a unicorn. Maybe we get acquired. Maybe we fade out in 5 years. But I built something real, something that helped thousands of families. And to me, that's already success. If you're sitting on an idea, wondering if it's good enough, here's my advice. Build the ugly version. Talk to real people. Make mistakes loudly. And if you're lucky, that spark might catch fire. I never thought I'd end up running a funeral live streaming company, but here we are. I was 31, burnt out, and newly unemployed when it all started. I had just quit my corporate job at a mid-sized ad agency in Chicago, where I'd spent 8 years slowly realizing I hated every moment of fake smiles and inflated metrics. I had savings, a 2011 Civic, and no real plan. The plan came 2 weeks later at my grandmother's funeral. My grandma had been one of those neighborhood legends, baked for every fundraiser, remembered every kid's name, and never missed Sunday Mass. She was 89 when she passed, and her funeral should have been massive. But this was in early 2021, and COVID restrictions were still in full swing. The church capped attendance at 20 people. That meant no cousins from Oregon, no second cousins from Florida, no old bingo friends from the senior center. So my cousin Leo, who does video production for weddings, set up a 2-camera live stream. Nothing fancy, a Canon on a tripod, another mounted on the back pew, and a live stream link on Vimeo. He even added an overlay with her name and birth/death dates. It wasn't professional, but it was touching. Hundreds of people logged in. We didn't even realize how many until days later when the family started getting messages like, "I'm so glad I could be there in some way," and asterisk, "Thank you for sharing this with us." Asterisk, that's when it clicked. I called Leo a week later and pitched the idea. What if we did this professionally? Not just for our family. What if people could book a funeral live stream just like they book flowers or catering? He thought about it, then said, "You'd run it." I told him yes. I had the business sense and the free time. He had the tech. We started simple. I registered a website, finalfarewelllive.com, bought a domain, threw up a bare-bones Squarespace page with a form, and created a Facebook page. Leo had some extra gear, and I ordered a few more tripods and remote cameras. Our startup costs were under $3K, not counting the van I bought used for $6,500 with way too many miles on it. At first, we cold called funeral homes. That was rough. Half of them didn't take us seriously. One told me it was tacky and hung up. But eventually, a director named Marcy in Aurora gave us a shot. A small service for a Vietnam vet. I showed up an hour early, wore a black suit, set up 2 Quiet Pete Easy cameras, and ran everything from a laptop in the back. We streamed the service to a private YouTube link with a watermark and soft piano background. 42 people tuned in. Afterward, Marcy called it tasteful and unobtrusive. And just like that, we had our first testimonial. We got our second and third clients the next month, both referrals. By month 4, we were doing 2 or 3 services a week. Leo kept doing weddings, but helped me build out a better back-end, custom scheduling software, a client dashboard, and automated email invites for viewers. I hired our first freelancer, a guy named Jerome, who had been laid off from the AV team at a hotel chain. He had great gear, great instincts, and wore a tie to every job. It wasn't a tech business, but I started treating it like one. We added a secure recording archive so families could rewatch or download. We created tiered packages, basic, 1 camera, no editing, standard, multicam plus light editing, and tribute, includes a slideshow and voiceover. Prices ranged from $500 to $2,500. Most people picked standard. People were hesitant at first. Death is still sacred, and the idea of cameras at a funeral struck some as impersonal. But once they saw it, how respectful it was, how it allowed distant loved ones to feel present, they got it. I got emails that floored me. A nurse in New Zealand wrote, "My sister's funeral was this morning, and I watched it on my break. I cried in the supply closet. Thank you for giving me that moment." That was the moment I stopped feeling weird about what I did. I wasn't a tech bro. I wasn't exploiting grief. I was making it easier to say goodbye. Year 1, we cleared $68K in revenue. Not life-changing, but not bad for something built in a garage. By year 2, we were in 6 states. I stopped filming myself and focused on operations. I built a team of 5 full-timers and a roster of 30 freelancers. We trained them with a quiet code. Wear black, never speak unless spoken to, always arrive an hour early, always offer tissues. Then came the scaling problem. We couldn't grow fast enough to keep up with demand. Every time we entered a new city, it took weeks to find, vet, and train new camera ops. Some weeks we had to turn people away. I started looking into franchising. I even spoke with a franchise consultant who told me to make it more sexy. I said, "It's a funeral business. Sexy isn't on the menu." Instead, I built a partnership program. We created kits, camera setups in rugged cases, tablets preloaded with our software, and remote support lines. Funeral homes could subscribe to the system for a monthly fee and run their own streams under our brand. We did the back end. They did the setup. It worked better than I expected. Within 6 months, 18 homes had signed up. Some even added it as an upsell in their own service menus. Now, for years in, we're in 17 states, have handled over 4,000 services, and just passed $1.8 million in lifetime revenue. We aren't billionaires. There are no VCs. Just a weird little business that found a need most people didn't know existed. We get asked about competitors all the time. There are a few now, startups with more funding, better branding. But honestly, it doesn't matter. We win on service, not tech. We win because every one of our reps understands that this is the most important day in someone's life, even if it's the end of another. People always say to follow your passion. I never had a passion for funerals. I had a passion for doing something that mattered. Turns out, helping people grieve across oceans and time zones? That matters. The weirdest part? Sometimes I forget what we do until I'm reviewing footage. And then it hits me, some little girl in London just got to watch her granddad's eulogy in Milwaukee. Some Marine overseas saw his mom's final moments because we brought a camera and pressed a button. That's our legacy. Quiet, background, essential. And honestly, I wouldn't trade it for anything. Let me start this off by saying I was never meant to be an entrepreneur. No lemonade stand at 10, no hustling candy at school, nothing like that. I was the quiet kid who wanted a stable job, preferably one where I didn't have to talk to too many people. So if you told my 25-year-old self that I'd end up running a successful business 7 years later, I probably would have laughed and gone back to watching Netflix on my couch. Back in 2018, I had just graduated with a degree in mechanical engineering. Landed a decent job at a mid-sized firm, spent my days drawing CD designs and trying to look busy when there was nothing to do, which was often. My boss was a decent guy, but the job felt soul-sucking. It didn't take long before the monotony started to eat away at me. I wanted to create something, but I didn't know what. The real turning point came one afternoon when my friend Jake and I were out getting tacos after work. Jake worked in construction and was complaining about how his crew always lost tools or had to deal with broken ones, and how there wasn't a good way to track inventory or share notes on site. I half-joked, someone should just build a tool for tools. Jake looked at me and said, "Why don't you?" At first, I laughed it off. But that night, the idea stuck with me. A digital platform for small construction teams to track tools, manage job sites, assign tasks, maybe even sync with vendors. Not revolutionary, but potentially useful. I started sketching out wireframes on napkins, then moved to Figma. I was still working full-time, but I started waking up at 5 a.m. to put in 2 hours before work. I knew I needed a dev to build anything real. I had done some Python in college, but this needed someone who could build an actual mobile app. I reached out to a few freelancers on Upwork, eventually finding a guy in Serbia named Milan. He quoted me $3,500 for a working MVP. It was more than I wanted to spend, but I had savings and no kids or mortgage, so I wired the money and hoped for the best. 6 weeks later, I had something real. Buggy, ugly, but real. I called it GearTrack. Jake got his crew to beta test it, and they liked it, sort of. They said it helped, but also that it was slow, the UI sucked, and there were too many buttons. I was bummed, but also energized. I kept iterating, and I started cold emailing small construction firms in the area, offering free use if they gave feedback. By month 4, I had 12 companies using GearTrack regularly. It was still free. I had no idea how to monetize, so I Googled how to price SaaS. Eventually, I decided on $49 per company. 7 out of 12 users signed up. That was $343 I remember staring at the striped dashboard like I had won the lottery. That's when things got complicated. I had to decide, do I keep juggling GearTrack in the mornings and nights while working full-time? Or do I take the leap? It felt insane, but I quit. My parents were horrified. "You're leaving a 6-figure job to make an app for hammers," my dad said. I told them to give me a year. Now with full days to focus, I threw myself into customer development. I drove to job sites, brought coffee and donuts, and watched how people used the app. One thing became clear: they hated typing. Construction workers didn't want to fill out long forms or track things manually. So I hired a second dev to help build voice command functionality. They could now say, "Mark drill is broken," and it would log it. That feature changed everything. Word spread fast, especially among local contractors. My user base tripled in 6 weeks. I was doing sales, support, product, and marketing all by myself. I remember once getting a call at 2 a.m. from a site manager who locked himself out of the app and needed to report stolen tools. I reset his password, and he signed up for the annual plan the next morning. Growth was steady, but not explosive. I hit $5K MRR by month 10. Enough to survive, barely. Then COVID hit. At first, I panicked. Sites shut down, new signups froze. But then, something surprising happened. Companies were being forced to digitize their operations. Suddenly, GearTrack looked less like a nice-to-have and more like a necessity. By the end of 2020, I was at $17K MRR. I hired my first full-time employee, a support rep named Lucy, who quickly became indispensable. With her taking care of customer issues, I could focus on growth. In early 2021, I got my first acquisition email. A large software company that catered to general contractors wanted to discuss synergies. I met with them out of curiosity, and they offered $1.2M. At the time, I was doing about $25K MRR. Tempting, but something felt off. GearTrack still had room to grow, and I felt like I was just starting to understand the market. I passed. Instead, I raised a small friends and family round, just $100K, to build out integrations with QuickBooks and Procore. That move unlocked a new customer segment, project managers at mid-sized firms. They wanted dashboards, cost tracking, and API access. I hired 2 more devs and brought on a fractional CTO. 2022 was a blur. We hit $50K MRR by October. Then, out of nowhere, one of our users posted a video on TikTok showing how GearTrack saved them from losing a $10K piece of machinery. The video blew up, over 800,000 views. That month alone, we signed up 120 new paying companies. By 2023, I was exhausted but proud. We were doing $1.2M ARR, had a team of 8, and had just launched our first iOS app. I paid myself a decent salary, took a week off, for the first time in 3 years, and actually relaxed. Now it's 2025. GearTrack is still growing. We're approaching $2M in ARR, and I just closed a seed round of $1.5M from a fund that actually used the product during a portfolio company renovation. The irony. I'm not going to pretend I'm a genius. I didn't invent a new technology. I just solved a real problem for a very specific group of people, and I kept listening to them. That's really it. So no, I wasn't born an entrepreneur. But I became one. I never planned to start a business. I wasn't the kid who sold lemonade or flipped Pokemon cards in elementary school. I was the kid who played video games and avoided group projects like the plague. But here I am, 5 years after starting a side hustle that turned into a full-time business, sitting in a cafe with my laptop, replying to emails from a team of 6 employees I never expected to have. It started with my last corporate job, which I got right after college. I was hired as a junior data analyst at a mid-size healthcare company. The pay was okay, benefits were fine, but the work culture? Miserable. My manager had this talent for micromanaging and ignoring human boundaries at the same time. The kind of guy who sends you a Slack message at 11:30 p.m. with quick question, smiley face, and then gets passive-aggressive when you don't respond until morning. The burnout hit me around year 2. I'd wake up already dreading the workday. I started spending more time on Reddit, YouTube, and niche blogs, just doom scrolling and escaping. One day I stumbled on a thread in our /data science where someone mentioned selling dashboards as a service to small businesses. That was the first time I realized, hey, maybe people outside of huge corporations actually need data help. I didn't act on it right away, but the idea lodged in my brain. I started taking small freelance gigs from sites like Upwork and Fiverr. At first, it was little stuff, cleaning CSV files, building basic Excel reports, helping people understand Google Analytics. Nothing glamorous, but it paid better than I expected. The turning point came when I landed a client. Let's call her Maria, who ran a chain of boutique gyms in Florida. She was drowning in data from multiple sources, scheduling software, Stripe payments, customer surveys, Instagram analytics, you name it. I offered to build her a dashboard that unified everything into one Google Data Studio report, updated in real time. It took me a week to set it up, and when I showed it to her, she almost cried. This would have saved me 2 years of stress, she said. She referred 2 other gym owners to me. Then those owners referred others. Within 3 months, I had a steady trickle of clients asking for similar solutions. I still had my day job, but I was making almost as much from freelancing. That's when I started getting serious. I built a basic site using Card, posted my services on Reddit in a very non-spammy, contribute-first way, and created a business Instagram page. I called the business Pulse-. Terrible name, but the domain was $2. Eventually, the side hustle made more than my full-time salary. But I was terrified of quitting. I didn't come from money, didn't have a financial safety net. I obsessed over numbers, ran budget scenarios and spreadsheets, and even asked my landlord how strict they were about late rent payments. Not my proudest moment. Then my manager did me a favor. He cornered me during a check-in and told me that if I wanted to grow in the company, I needed to smile more and start being a team player. That night, I typed up my resignation letter and gave myself a 2-month runway. Going full-time on Pulse- was a weird mix of thrill and terror. I was finally free, but I had no idea how to run a business. I made every mistake you can imagine. Undercharging, overcommitting, forgetting to invoice, saying yes to clients I should have run from. I distinctly remember one guy, an e-commerce store owner who wanted daily dashboards, SEO advice, Shopify custom code, and help running Facebook ads. All for $250/month. I took the deal. By month 2, I was so stressed I was getting hives. I dropped him and doubled my prices. Some clients left, but the ones who stayed actually valued the work more. Year 2 was when things got interesting. I realized that building dashboards was only part of the value. The real value was helping business owners make decisions from their data. So I started offering monthly insight calls as part of the service. These calls, 30 to 45 minutes, once a month, were game changers. Clients would come with questions like, which product category should I drop? Or, why did revenue dip in Q3? I'd use their dashboard data to walk them through the answers. That service became the cornerstone of PulseDash. We stopped being dashboard builders and became data partners. Cheesy. Maybe. But it worked. By the end of year 3, I had too many clients to handle solo. I hired my first contractor, then a second. I messed up payroll, forgot to set up contracts, and paid a guy in Bitcoin because he asked and I didn't know how to say no. But I learned. I started using real accounting software, hired a lawyer for templates, and got a business bank account. Way too late. Now we're in year 5. PulseDash is still small. We work with about 40 clients, mostly small to mid-sized e-commerce and service businesses. I have a team of 6, all remote, and we've grown mostly through word of mouth. No paid ads, no cold outreach. Just good work, delivered consistently. I'm not a millionaire. I still have months where I freak out about cash flow. I'm still learning how to be a decent manager. But I'm not waking up every day dreading work. I'm not answering Slack messages at midnight. I'm doing work I care about, with people I chose to work with. People romanticize entrepreneurship like it's this epic hero's journey, but most of the time it's awkward, stressful, and full of trial and error. You spend hours making a perfect Notion dashboard only to realize no one uses it. You spend $3,000 on a rebrand, and then go back to the original logo 6 months later. You feel like a fraud, then a genius, then a fraud again. But if you can stomach the uncertainty, if you're willing to keep learning and getting back up after each dumb mistake, there's something really satisfying about building something from scratch. Not something perfect, just something yours. So yeah, that's how a burned-out data analyst with no business background accidentally built a data consulting company. No investors, no viral tweet, no hockey stick growth. Just one small project after another. And if you're sitting there right now, half hating your job and half scrolling through ideas you think you're not qualified to try, maybe you are. Maybe you just haven't started yet. In 2018, I quit my job at a mid-sized tech company to build a startup no one asked for. I was a back-end engineer, not particularly brilliant, but dependable. For 6 years, I showed up, met deadlines, and kept servers humming. I made good money, had stock options that were probably never going to be worth anything, and commuted 30 minutes each way to an office that smelled like old coffee and despair. Then one afternoon, I saw a coworker get laid off without warning. He was good, maybe better than me. One minute he was joking about tacos on Slack, the next he was packing his desk. No fanfare, no thank you speech, just security hovering near his cube. That night, something snapped. I realized I was one poorly timed meeting away from the same fate. I didn't want to build someone else's product anymore. I wanted to own the risk, and maybe, just maybe, the reward too. So I put in my notice and walked out with nothing but a $30K savings buffer and a vague idea about a scheduling tool for freelancers. Yeah, I know. I'd done freelance work on the side and hated juggling meetings with clients in multiple time zones. So I figured, why not make a dead simple booking system with integrated time zone detection, payment support, and calendar syncing? Like Calendly, but stripped down, faster, and with a slick UX for mobile-first users. I called it Synchro. The first mistake I made, I started coding. I didn't validate the idea. I didn't talk to users. I didn't even check if there were 1,000 competitors doing exactly the same thing. I just locked myself in my apartment and built a prototype in React and Node.js, running on Firebase. 6 weeks in, Synchro could take a booking, display availability, and send a confirmation email. I was proud. I told my mom. She said, That sounds useful. Can I use it to book a haircut? I said, no, it's for freelancers. She said, well, maybe make it work for haircuts too. I ignored her. Mistake number 2. When I finally launched on Product Hunt, Synchro got 56 upvotes, mostly from friends and some old co-workers I guilt-tripped on LinkedIn. A few signups trickled in. I was ecstatic. I emailed each one personally and asked how they found it. Most didn't reply. The ones who did said things like, just checking it out, or, I already use Calendly, just curious. After 2 months, I had 118 signups and $0 in revenue. I panicked. I had already burned through $6K of my savings and was still paying rent in San Francisco. So I pivoted slightly. I added a payment feature where users could charge for bookings, great for consultants, coaches, and online tutors. I thought this would be my breakthrough. It wasn't. One guy used it to charge for chess lessons. Another used it for voice coaching. Neither stuck around. I emailed again. One responded, it's good, but Stripe's setup is confusing. That's when I realized something brutal. I had built a product, not a business. The tool worked. It solved a problem, but not a painful enough one. Calendly already existed. So did Acuity. So did 10 other tools with big funding and marketing teams. I had nothing but code and stress-induced insomnia. One night, around 3 a.m., I posted my story to a subreddit for solo founders. The top comment hit hard. Nice app. But who's your audience, and how will you reach them? I couldn't answer. So I shut Synchro down. For about a week, I spiraled. I thought about crawling back to my old company. I even messaged a recruiter. But before I could send my resume, I got a message on Twitter from a guy named Raj. Raj was one of the 118 early users. He ran a tiny agency that managed social media for wellness influencers. He liked Synchro, but not for booking. He liked the calendar UI I had built and wanted to license it for a different product he was building. At first, I thought he was joking, but we met for coffee. He showed me his project, a client portal where influencers could manage content pipelines, including meetings, deliverables, and approvals. He needed the calendar piece embedded into his dashboard. I agreed. We worked out a deal $2K for a white-labeled version of my calendar module. It wasn't much, but it was oxygen. That gig led to another. A startup in edtech wanted something similar. Then a therapist booking platform needed custom calendar views. Suddenly, Synchro wasn't a product, it was a component. A tool set I could adapt. So I changed direction entirely. I stopped trying to sell the app and started offering modular components for niche SaaS platforms, appointment scheduling, time zone handling, and embeddable calendars. I rebranded everything under the name TimeGrid Components and built a small site with examples and pricing. The homepage said, Calendar Components built for your SaaS, so you can stop reinventing time. Corny, but it worked. By mid-2019, I had 5 steady clients and was making about $6K/month. Not rocket money, but enough to stay afloat. I dropped the apartment, moved into a shared house with 2 other founders, and doubled down. I learned to listen to customers. I added better documentation. I stopped overbuilding. Most of all, I stopped pretending I was building the next big thing. I was building something useful, and that was enough. Over the next year, the business grew slowly but steadily. I never took funding, never hired. I kept it lean. In 2021, I hit $12K/month. That's when I started getting acquisition emails. Most were spammy. But one company, a well-known SaaS infrastructure provider, made a legit offer. Buy TimeGrid Components outright for $480K. It wasn't a life-changing number, but it was enough to erase debt, buy time, and breathe. I sold. I still do some consulting, and I'm working on a new idea now. This time starting with a niche problem, real users, and no illusions. Entrepreneurship isn't about being a visionary genius. For me, it was about failing fast, listening harder, and being humble enough to pivot when my brilliant idea turned out to be just another clone. Oh, and my mom. She runs a small salon now. Uses Calendly. I helped her set it up. I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. That wasn't the dream. I just wanted to pay off my student loans, eat better than microwave ramen, and maybe buy concert tickets without checking my bank account 5 times. But somehow, 2 years after graduating with a business degree I barely used, I ended up running a small tech company out of a rented office above a vape shop. This is how that happened. Back in 2017, I was working a miserable customer support job for a mid-sized SaaS company in Minneapolis. I answered the same 5 questions 100 times a day and prayed for some kind of internal transfer that never came. My cubicle mate, Jared, and I passed the time by creating internal tools to automate the more annoying parts of our jobs. Eventually, I built a Chrome extension that autofilled customer info into our CRM with a single click. It saved us maybe 10 seconds per interaction. Nobody cared, except Jared and me. When layoffs started rolling out in early 2018, I saw the writing on the wall and used my final weeks to quietly build a better version of the extension. By the time I got the HR email, I had a GitHub repo, a working prototype, and a long Google Doc of potential use cases. I didn't get another job right away. My severance was modest, but my rent was cheap, and I figured I had a couple of months to try something before reality forced me to update my resume. I listed the extension on the Chrome Web Store as Snapfill and priced it at $3/month. I posted it on Product Hunt, Hacker News, and a few SaaS communities. To my surprise, people started buying it. Not a lot, maybe 30 people in the first 2 weeks, but it was validation. One of those early users was a recruiter at a major tech company. He emailed me and asked if I could build a version for their internal tool. I had no idea how to price something like that, so I just said, I can do a custom build for $800. He Venmo'd me the money the same day. That $800 felt like I'd won the lottery. I poured it into Firebase credits and a new domain name. I taught myself how to write better documentation. I emailed every early user asking for feedback. I pushed out new features weekly. My girlfriend at the time wasn't thrilled about how much time I spent coding in our apartment, but I couldn't stop. It was the first time I felt like I was building something people wanted. By mid-2019, Snapfill had 500 paying users and was making around $200/month. I still wasn't rich, but I was paying rent. I started to see small teams at real companies sign up. I built an analytics dashboard, hired a freelance designer from Upwork to make it look halfway decent, and raised the price to $5/month. I also started getting emails from potential competitors, some friendly, some not. One guy accused me of stealing his idea. I hadn't, but it rattled me. The turning point came in late 2019 when a user at a healthcare tech startup emailed me asking for a team plan. I didn't have one, so I built it over a weekend. They signed up 40 employees the next week at $5 per user. That was $200/month from a single company. I realized I could sell directly to businesses, not just individuals. In early 2020, I officially registered the company as an LLC and rented a tiny office space with a second-hand couch and 2 desks. Jared had been laid off too, and I brought him on as a part-time contractor to handle customer support and QA. We used Slack, Notion, and Google Sheets to run everything. I did sales calls from a broom closet we called the Deal Denver. Then the pandemic hit. At first, I thought we were doomed. New sign-ups slowed to a crawl. Teams froze budgets. But something strange happened around May 2020. Remote work exploded, and suddenly, tools that helped people be more efficient, especially ones that didn't require IT approval, were in demand. Snapfill's user base doubled by July, then tripled. We hit $10K MRR in October. I took my first paycheck in 2 years. Jared came on full-time. We hired a junior dev. I still worked 70-hour weeks, but now it was building onboarding flows, writing cold emails to team leads at mid-sized companies, and navigating the nightmare that is international VAT compliance. But the real game changer was when a VP at a Fortune 500 company reached out about an enterprise license. He wanted to buy 2,000 seats. We were not ready. I didn't even know how to structure a contract that big. I called in a favor from a lawyer friend, hired a CPA, and spent 3 weeks customizing a version of the extension that could run in their internal browser environment. The deal closed in January 2021. We made more in one invoice than I had in all of 2019. After that, we had leverage. We raised our prices again. We added SSO, admin controls, advanced reporting. We got mentioned in a TechCrunch article about remote tools. Suddenly, we were seen as a real company, not just a Chrome extension hacked together by 2 guys in hoodies. I got offers to acquire us, nothing huge, but enough to tempt me. I even had one call with a VC who said, if you build this out into a full productivity suite, we'll write you a check tomorrow. But I didn't want to turn it into a bloated monster. The magic was in the simplicity. Today, Snapfill makes around $80K/month. We're a team of 8, fully remote. I still take customer support tickets sometimes, mostly to stay grounded. We've had our rough patches, scaling issues, employee drama, feature failures, but we're profitable, bootstrapped, and independent. I've paid off my loans. I bought those concert tickets. I even flew my mom to Europe for her birthday last year. Not bad for a tool that started as a way to avoid typing names into Salesforce. So no, I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. But now that I am one, I wouldn't trade it for anything. I never thought I'd end up running a $1 million business out of a garage, but I also didn't think I'd be fired on a Monday for doing exactly what my boss told me to. Let me back up. 2 years ago, I was working as a product designer for a mid-sized outdoor gear company in Oregon. I loved the job, or at least I told myself I did. I was the guy they called too passionate in meetings, always pushing for more sustainable materials, better designs, and arguing that maybe the world didn't need another generic camping mug with a company logo slapped on it. The straw that broke everything came during a product pitch. I had this design for a modular backpack that could convert into a sleeping mat. It was practical, durable, and made of fully recycled material. I poured months into it. My manager gave me the green light to mock it up, and when I presented it to the higher-ups, they shut it down immediately. Too expensive, too niche, not enough mass market appeal. But then, a week later, they unveiled a new innovation that looked suspiciously like mine, except cheaper, crappier, and made of nylon that smelled like gasoline. I called it out, loudly, and I got canned. No severance, no warning, just pack your things. I moped for a week. Then I started sketching. I didn't have a grand vision. I just thought, what if I made the backpack my way? I had $8,000 in savings, a garage that leaked when it rained, and a sewing machine I hadn't used since college. I ordered some recycled sailcloth from a supplier in Maine, found an old industrial sewing table on Craigslist, and went to work. The first prototype took me 3 weeks. I called it the Sleep Pack, yes, in all caps. It was ugly as hell, black with lopsided zippers, but it worked. It folded into a sleeping mat in under 30 seconds, had internal compartments for food and gear, and the fabric was water-resistant and built to last. I posted photos on Instagram and Reddit. No marketing budget, no fancy site, just me being real. I said, hey, I got fired for trying to make this. So I made it anyway. If you want one, I'll make more. I expected maybe 10 orders. I got 147 in the first week. Cue panic. I had no idea how to scale. I was literally building every pack myself in my garage, hand sewing the straps. I stayed up until 4 a.m. for 2 weeks straight and still couldn't keep up. My cousin had done some supply chain work, and he helped me set up a small batch production run in Montana. We sent the first 200 packs by mid-March, and the reviews were insane. People posted photos of their sleep packs on mountaintops, in forests, on the roofs of vans. I started getting emails from outdoor stores. REI reached out. That's when I hit the next wall. Money. I had about $2,000 left in my bank account and needed at least $50K for the next run. I couldn't get a bank loan, no credit history worth a damn, and VCs laughed me off the phone. Backpacks, one said. It's not even tech. So I launched a Kickstarter. I shot the video with my phone, edited it on a borrowed MacBook, and told my story. Honest, raw. I didn't pretend to be a polished company. I said, I'm a guy who got fired for trying to do the right thing, and this is my shot to do it on my own terms. The campaign raised $112,000 in 30 days. I cried. Not proud tears. Ugly ones. It's not an all. With that funding, I leased a small workshop space, hired 2 part-time seamstresses, and ordered real equipment. I wasn't sleeping much, but I was alive in a way I hadn't been in years. 6 months in, I got a call from an executive at a major outdoor brand, the same one that fired me. He congratulated me on my success story and asked if I'd be interested in licensing the design. I asked him if he remembered firing me. He didn't. I turned him down. The sleep pack wasn't just a product anymore. It was a symbol, for me, and apparently for a whole bunch of people who were tired of mass-produced crap and corporate greenwashing. Sales passed $500,000 in the first year. We expanded the product line, added a minimalist travel version, a kids pack, even a version with solar panels. I hired a full-time team. The garage became an office. Then the office became a warehouse. Now we're closing in on $3 million in revenue, and we've stayed profitable the whole time. The funny part is, people always ask if I want revenge. Like, do I ever want to walk into my old job, drop a duffel bag full of cash on my ex-boss's desk, and say, guess I was right? But I don't. The truth is, getting fired was the best thing that ever happened to me. It shoved me off a cliff, and I had to learn how to fly. Entrepreneurship isn't glamorous. It's terrifying, exhausting, and lonely sometimes. There were nights I sat on the workshop floor surrounded by fabric scraps and wondered if I'd just ruined my life. But then I remember the emails from customers saying the pack got them through their first solo hike, or that it was the only bed they had during a rough patch. And I realize, I'm building more than gear. I'm building something that matters. And I did it with a sewing machine, a little anger, and a lot of duct tape. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. I never thought I'd end up here, writing this from the corner office of a company I built out of desperation, with 47 employees on payroll and a backlog of orders I never dreamed of. It all started with a bottle of hot sauce and a panic attack in a Target parking lot. 3 years ago, I was broke. Like, dangerously broke. I had just been laid off from a startup that got acquired and gutted. Severance was pathetic, my lease was ending, and I had about $300 in my account with no prospects. I'm a college dropout with a pretty good nose for branding and marketing, but without a degree or connections, no one was hiring me. The panic attack hit while I was eating a gas station burrito in the parking lot of a Target in suburban Kansas City. My hands were shaking. I felt like the world was collapsing in. And then, for whatever reason, I remembered something my grandfather used to say. If your tongue's on fire, at least you know you're still alive. He was obsessed with hot sauce. Used to make his own from ghost peppers and mangoes. It was an old Caribbean recipe that he brought with him when he immigrated. People loved it, but he only gave it out at barbecues. So, in that moment of chaos, I pulled out my phone, Googled how to make hot sauce shelf-stable, and decided to try bottling his old recipe. I didn't have the money to rent a commercial kitchen or buy proper bottling supplies, so I started small. I went home, dug up the handwritten recipe from a dusty box of his old stuff, and went to work in my friend's kitchen. He let me crash on his couch for free if I cooked dinner. I made 5 bottles in old beer bottles with screw-on tops I found at Goodwill. Printed a label from my friend's inkjet printer. The name? Firetongue. Tagline: if you can still feel it, you're not done yet. I posted a photo on Instagram and Facebook, tagging a few local foodie groups. To my surprise, 3 people messaged me that same day asking where they could buy a bottle. That first week, I sold 12 bottles at $7 each. Nothing crazy, but it felt like winning the lottery. I reinvested every dollar into ingredients. By the end of the first month, I had made $580. Not enough to live, but enough to taste the potential. Word of mouth kicked in faster than I expected. I started delivering bottles by bike. One buyer was a food blogger with 30,000 followers. She posted a rave review about how it was like being punched in the mouth by an angel. Orders exploded overnight. Now, I had a real problem. I couldn't keep up. Making 10 bottles a day was fine when demand was low, but now I had 300 orders pending, and my friend was threatening to evict me because I set off the smoke alarm twice in 1 week. I needed help. I used my last $200 to rent time in a shared commercial kitchen twice a week. I offered free bottles to 2 culinary students I found on Craigslist if they'd help me prep. They were lifesavers. One of them, Tony, ended up becoming my first employee. We made 500 bottles in a week and set up a booth at the local farmer's market. I was terrified no one would show, but we sold out in 3 hours. A local craft store owner approached me and said she'd carry a few cases. Then a barbecue restaurant asked if they could put it on their tables. I realized I had 2 things going for me: a great product and a great story. People loved the immigrant grandpa origin, the name, and the fire. But I also knew I couldn't scale like this. So I made a decision that felt insane at the time. I took out a $10,000 loan under my name and registered Firetongue as an LLC. With the loan, I got a graphic designer from Fiverr to redesign the label, bought proper glass bottles, built a Shopify store, and paid a buddy to shoot a promo video featuring local foodies doing taste tests. Sales tripled within 2 months. I was still working like a madman, sleeping 4 hours a night, doing every role: marketing, logistics, accounting, bottling, shipping. But slowly, I started hiring part-time help. I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment and converted the second bedroom into a mini HQ. The next big break came when a TikTok influencer featured our sauce in a 10 under $10 spicy foods list. We got 11,000 orders in one weekend. Shopify crashed. I cried in the shower. Then I pulled myself together and called everyone I knew. We fulfilled every order in 2 weeks. By the end of year 1, we hit $310,000 in revenue. Year 2, we expanded to 3 new flavors: a jalapeno pineapple blend that we called Green Scream, and a limited edition Blackout made with Carolina Reapers. Our customers were ride or die. They posted YouTube challenges, created fan art, even got tattoos of our logo. I couldn't believe it. I pitched a Whole Foods regional. They passed, but Sprouts didn't. That gave us credibility. With that win, I secured a $200K investment from a local venture fund in exchange for 15%. We moved into a real facility. I hired full-time staff. Year 3, Firetongue cleared $2.1 million in revenue. We're now in 250 retail stores across 6 states. We just signed a deal with a national meal kit company to include our mini bottles in select boxes. I still get imposter syndrome. Sometimes I think back to that gas station burrito and wonder what would have happened if I'd just given up. But I didn't. Because when everything was burning down, I found something that made me feel alive again. So here's my unsolicited advice to anyone stuck in a hole: look for the weird spark. That one crazy idea you keep writing off. You don't need a perfect plan. You need momentum. One tiny win, then another. And remember, if your tongue's on fire, at least you're still in the game. I never planned to become an entrepreneur. My original goal was to coast through life quietly, earn enough to live comfortably, and maybe retire early. I wasn't ambitious in the typical sense, but I was good with tech, specifically back-end systems, and I liked building things that worked efficiently. It all started in 2020, during the early months of the pandemic. I was working as a senior engineer for a large SaaS company. You'd think I had it made: stable job, decent pay, remote work. But I was suffocating under meetings and pointless Jira tickets. I spent more time explaining to non-technical PMs why their quick feature would take 3 weeks than actually coding. The spark was gone. I didn't hate my job. I just didn't care anymore. Then came the layoff rumors. My division wasn't profitable enough. Leadership was considering strategic resizing. I wasn't worried at first, but by August, 60% of my team was gone. I survived the first round, but the writing was on the wall. I updated my resume and quietly started applying elsewhere. One night, I was venting to my brother over beers. He owns a few short-term rental properties and was complaining about the nightmare of managing cleaners. They'd ghost him, show up late, or forget to send photos. He was using a hacked-together system of WhatsApp, Google Sheets, and Venmo to manage everything. I half-jokingly said, "I could build you something better in a weekend." He said, "Then do it. I'll pay." I didn't take it seriously until the next morning when he texted me, asking for a timeline. I shrugged and opened up VS Code. What started as a weekend project turned into 2 weeks of full-on obsession. I built a basic dashboard where he could assign cleanings, view real-time updates, and pay cleaners. I used Firebase for auth and a lightweight Node backend with a Postgres database. Cleaners got SMS alerts when jobs were assigned. They could confirm completion by uploading photos. He loved it. So did his cleaner. So did 2 of his property owner friends. Within a month, I had 5 users, none paying, all giving feedback. I didn't even have a name for it yet. I got laid off that October. HR scheduled a Zoom call for 4:30 on a Friday. It lasted 7 minutes. Severance was 8 weeks. That gave me a tiny runway. I could have jumped back into the job market, but I had this weird sense of calm. For the first time in years, I had control over my work. I decided to give the app, now named Sweeply, a real shot. I slapped together a logo on Canva, built a basic landing page with pricing tiers, $19/MO, $49/MO, and $99/MO, and posted it in a few Airbnb and property management Facebook groups. That night, I got 12 signups. 6 converted to paid. This was real. The next few months were a blur of learning. Stripe integration broke constantly. Cleaners complained about the photo upload tool. Property owners asked for batch scheduling. I didn't sleep much, but I was alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. By March 2021, Sweeply had 137 users. Monthly revenue hit $4,200. Not enough to live large, but enough to keep me out of the job market. I hit every milestone I could find online. First $1K MRR, then $5K, then $10K. I did everything myself: support, dev work, even marketing. I wrote blog posts, filmed YouTube walkthroughs, ran small Reddit ads, and did AMA sessions in property management groups. Growth was slow, but it was steady. Each new feature added a bit more stickiness. In August 2021, a user from Texas emailed me. He managed 86 properties across 3 cities. His cleaner network was a mess. He asked if Sweeply could support custom cleaner routing, tiered pricing, and multi-admin roles. I said, not yet, but give me 2 weeks. It took me 4. He became my first enterprise client at $499/month. That's when I knew I needed help. I posted a job on AngelList for a co-founder type CTO. I didn't want to give up too much equity, but I needed someone who could help scale the platform. I got 46 applications, interviewed 12, and partnered with a guy named Tarek. He built and sold a fleet tracking app in 2018 and was itching to build again. He came on for 20% equity and a $2,000/month stipend, which I could barely afford. Together, we rebuilt Sweeply from scratch. We migrated from Firebase to Auth0, rewrote the backend in Nest.js, moved to AWS ECS, and started using proper CI/CD. Tarek handled the infra, I handled the user experience. We hired our first customer success rep in February 2022. By then, we had 890 active users and $38K MRR. Then we got noticed. A property management software company tried to copy our cleaner module. One of our users tipped us off. It sucked, but it was also flattering. We were clearly doing something right. Our retention rate was 94%, and referrals were our biggest growth lever. In May 2022, a VC firm reached out. They offered to lead a $1.2 seed round. I wasn't sure. We were profitable, growing steadily, and I hated the idea of board meetings. But scaling was getting hard. Our biggest users were requesting API integrations, Zapier support, and data exports. We couldn't keep up. We took the deal, but on our terms. Tarek and I kept majority control. That money changed everything. We hired 4 engineers, 2 salespeople, and a real designer. Sweeply started looking and feeling like a mature SaaS company. We launched a mobile app for cleaners with GPS check-in, multilingual support, and offline mode. Churn dropped. Average contract size grew. By Q1 2023, we hit $1 MARR. Today, Sweeply manages over 12,000 properties. We power over 100,000 cleaning jobs per month. Our team is 28 people. We're still fully remote. I work from my garage, now slightly upgraded with heating and a better desk. Sometimes I look back and laugh. I didn't set out to build a startup. I just wanted to help my brother. That small act of solving a real problem opened a door I didn't even know existed. And I walked through it. I accidentally became the founder of a $1 million logistics startup after a food truck crisis at a music festival. No joke. 3 years ago, I was working as a freelance graphic designer. Money was inconsistent, but I loved the flexibility. I had zero intentions of becoming an entrepreneur, let alone in logistics, a world I knew absolutely nothing about. But life has a funny way of cornering you when you're just trying to get a burrito. Let me rewind. My best friend Alex is a DJ. One summer, he got invited to perform at this up-and-coming indie music festival in Northern California. I tagged along because he got a +1, and I figured I'd make a mini vacation out of it. I wasn't expecting anything more than sun, music, and some overpriced IPAs. The first day was chaos. The music was great, vibes were immaculate, but by noon, people started getting hangry. Long lines at the food trucks turned into angry mobs. I waited over 90 minutes for a lukewarm falafel wrap. Alex missed his sound check trying to get a water bottle. Turns out, one of the vendors had a flat tire on the way in, another ran out of propane by 11 a.m., and one had their fridge fail overnight, so they had to dump everything. And no one knew when or how replacements were coming. The festival had hired a third-party coordinator who was apparently ghosting everyone now that things were falling apart. I started talking to some of the vendors. They were all frustrated, but what struck me was that no one had any centralized way to manage their inventory, schedule deliveries, or get help in real time. They were relying on text threads, email chains, and hope. By the end of the second day, I had an idea. Now, I'm not a developer. I can barely write CSS. But I'd done enough UX/UI design work for SaaS startups to understand workflows and pain points. On the drive back, I sketched out a rough wireframe of what I called StackRoute, a logistics coordination platform specifically for mobile vendors, festivals, and live events. The name didn't mean much then, but it sounded startup-wide. The initial concept was simple: real-time location tracking of all vendors, inventory status updates, push notifications for emergencies, like propane running out or health inspections, and route optimization for deliveries. I showed it to a few people from the festival who were still steamed about what went down, and they were immediately interested. One even said, "If you build this, I'll be your first customer." That sentence was like lighting a fuse in my brain. I started small. I posted on indie developer forums and found a guy named Hari who was based in Bangalore. He was between jobs and offered to help me build a prototype for dirt cheap. I paid him half upfront, $600 I scraped together by selling my PlayStation and taking on a rush branding job for a cannabis startup. In about 6 weeks, we had a very ugly, very clunky, but functional MVP. I called in every favor I had, convinced a small local art festival in Sacramento to use StackRoute for their 12 food vendors. We gave it to them for free, just to see what broke. Plenty broke. The app crashed 3 times on the first day. One vendor's inventory didn't sync properly, and someone else kept getting alerts meant for a different food truck. But the concept worked. Deliveries that previously took hours of back and forth happened in under 30 minutes. The organizer told me it was the smoothest logistics experience they'd had, even with all the bugs. We iterated. I brought Hari on as co-founder. We applied to a couple of accelerators and got rejected by all of them, except for this tiny one in Boise that offered us $10K and 3 months of mentorship. We took it. I moved into a friend's garage. Hari flew over from India on a tourist visa and slept on an air mattress next to my desk. We coded nonstop. We signed 2 more festivals and started charging. Not much, just $500 per event, but it was enough to keep us afloat. The key insight was that the real money wasn't in charging the vendors or even the organizers. It was in building partnerships with delivery services and equipment rental companies. They were the ones bleeding cash from missed or inefficient drop-offs. We created a dashboard just for them, and suddenly they were throwing money at us. By the end of our first year, we had $80K in revenue. Not life-changing, but way more than I had made freelancing. I found out one of the vendors had passed our info to a massive production company that handled logistics for 20-plus regional festivals. They called us asking for a proposal. We panicked, then pulled 3 all-nighters putting together a pitch deck. We won the contract. $240K for the year. That's when we decided to go all in. We raised a pre-seed round of $400K from a couple of angel investors and bootstrapped the rest. Hired 2 full-time devs, 1 salesperson, and a customer success manager. We started targeting not just festivals, but construction sites, pop-up markets, and even emergency relief centers. Anywhere mobile logistics coordination was a nightmare, we wanted StackRoute to be there. We also built out integrations with GPS providers, food safety inspection APIs, and started working on AI-driven delivery forecasts based on traffic and weather data. The tech was finally catching up to our ambition. In year 2, we hit $1.1 million in revenue. We turned down 2 acquisition offers, one from a logistics giant who clearly just wanted our client list, and another from an event management platform that lowballed us hard. Now it's been just over 3 years since I stood in line for that sad falafel wrap. We're at $3.7 million ARR, have 26 full-time employees, and just signed a deal to be the official logistics platform for a major U.S. food truck championship circuit. My co-founder got his visa and moved here full-time. We actually pay ourselves salaries now. I still do some design work, mostly just for our own app, but I don't freelance anymore. The other day I got an email from that guy who said he'd be our first customer. He's running a chain of 6 gourmet grilled cheese trucks now, and StackRoute is integrated into all of them. So yeah, I became a logistics entrepreneur by accident, all because I was hungry and stubborn. I started my first business from the back of a Toyota Corolla. It was 2015, and I had just quit my job at a mid-sized marketing agency where I'd been working as a junior copywriter. The job wasn't bad, but I always had this itch that I wasn't using my full potential. Every day felt like I was borrowing someone else's dream. I didn't have a business plan. I didn't have savings. I had $4,300 in my checking account and a credit card with a $6,000 limit. But what I did have was a laptop, a reliable internet connection, and a small roster of freelance clients I'd built while moonlighting for the past year. Mostly, I was doing content writing for startups, blogs, website copy, email sequences. I knew I could scrape by if I was disciplined. What I didn't know was that I was about to get punched in the face by reality. The first 3 months were okay. I got some referrals, a few new clients, and one decent retainer. But around month 4, everything started drying up. One client ghosted me mid-project, another ran out of funding and canceled their contract. By month 6, I was behind on rent, living on peanut butter sandwiches, and trying to sell my TV on Craigslist to make a car payment. I almost caved. I remember sitting in a Starbucks, looking at LinkedIn job listings, and feeling this mix of shame and relief at the thought of going back to a cubicle. But something in me refused to quit. If I failed, I wanted to fail swinging. That night, I made a list of everything I was doing for clients. Writing copy, sure, but I was also doing research, testing headlines, building personas. It wasn't just content. I was helping them find their voice and connect with customers. That was brand strategy. I just never called it that. I decided to rebrand myself not as a copywriter, but as a strategic branding consultant. I redid my website overnight, bought a $29 logo from a designer in Indonesia, and rewrote my bio to sound like I was running a boutique consultancy instead of operating from a fold-out desk in my bedroom. It worked. 2 weeks later, I pitched a SaaS founder on a complete brand overhaul. I packaged it as a 6-week engagement, customer interviews, brand voice development, website copy, email flows. I quoted him $5,000, which was triple what I'd charged before. I expected him to laugh. Instead, he said, "Can you start Monday?" That project changed everything. Over the next year, I doubled down on positioning. I started speaking at local meetups and did guest posts on marketing blogs. I started using Calendly, recorded Loom videos for prospects, and made custom slide decks for every proposal. I wasn't just selling copy. I was selling confidence in a message. By the end of 2017, I had more work than I could handle. I hired a project manager part-time, then brought on 2 writers as contractors. We called ourselves North and West Brand Studio, mostly because I liked how it sounded. Our clients were small but interesting: a language learning app, a fintech startup in Canada, a subscription coffee brand. All needed help turning complex ideas into clear, engaging stories. Then, in 2019, a curveball. One of our clients, a startup in the logistics space, asked if we could do product marketing. Specifically, they wanted help creating onboarding emails, in-app messages, and feature announcements. It wasn't what we'd done before, but I said yes. I dove in, learned everything I could about product-led growth, and built a mini-team focused just on that client. Within 3 months, we were crushing it. Their churn dropped, feature adoption went up, and they referred us to 2 more companies. I realized that SaaS product marketing was a gold mine and wildly underserved by typical branding agencies. That summer, I made the hardest decision since I started the business. I shut down most of our traditional branding work and pivoted entirely to SaaS product marketing. We narrowed our services, rewrote our site again, and renamed the company Reverb. I let 2 contractors go and hired a product marketer from a B2B startup instead. We were focused, niche, and suddenly growing faster than ever. From 2020 to 2022, Reverb went from $220K to $980K in annual revenue. We stayed lean, just 5 full-timers and a few trusted freelancers. Our clients weren't flashy, but they were loyal. We built dashboards in Notion to track onboarding metrics. We created reusable messaging frameworks, and we ran training sessions for internal product teams. But the real game changer came in 2023 when a client suggested we turn our process into a product. At first, I dismissed it. We were a service company. But he pushed. You're already doing this work. Why not systematize it? So we built FlowKit, a SaaS tool that helps PMs and marketers create onboarding flows using our templates and frameworks. We bootstrapped the MVP using Bubble and some custom code. Launched it quietly to our client base. Within 3 months, we had 600 users and MRR of $12K. I never expected to build software. But because we knew the pain points so intimately and had solved them dozens of times, it was like building a product with cheat codes. Today, Reverb is 2 businesses, a boutique SaaS marketing studio and a growing product company. I split my time between the two, and finally, after years of uncertainty, I feel like I'm not just surviving. I'm building something real. When I look back at the early days, the panic, the peanut butter sandwiches, the endless nights cold emailing founders, I don't feel nostalgia exactly. I feel gratitude. That 6-month gauntlet broke something in me, and in the wreckage, I found clarity. Not every business needs to be a unicorn. Some just need to be sustainable, purposeful, and personal. And if you're willing to keep evolving, sometimes painfully, you'll find your way. The truth is, I didn't launch one company. I launched 4, a freelance hustle, a creative studio, a niche consultancy, and now a software startup. And they all started in the back of a Corolla. I never planned on becoming an entrepreneur. In fact, if you told me 5 years ago I'd be running a successful niche logistics company out of a repurposed warehouse in southern Ohio, I would have laughed, pointed at my Taco Bell name tag, and offered you a free chalupa. Back in 2020, I was a college dropout with 2 failed attempts at getting a business degree. I wasn't failing because I was stupid. I just couldn't sit still long enough to memorize marketing buzzwords and economic theory that felt completely disconnected from the real world. I wanted to do things, not read about how other people did them. I was delivering food, working odd jobs, and scrolling job boards at 2 a.m. like a desperate gambler hoping the next click would be the jackpot. The pandemic had tanked everything, and I was just one more kid trying to keep above water in a system that didn't care. Then something weird happened. One night, while scrolling Craigslist for gigs, I stumbled across a post. Need someone to transport specialty antiques to Nashville. Must have owned van. Cash. I didn't have a van, but I did have an ancient Ford F-150 that my uncle had given me when he upgraded. I texted the number. The client turned out to be an interior designer based in Cincinnati, and they were renovating a historic estate down in Tennessee. The catch? The items were expensive, like French imported sideboards and Tiffany lamps expensive, and needed to be handled with extreme care. I convinced them I could pad everything well, even borrowed moving blankets and bubble wrap from a friend who worked at U-Haul. The job paid $400. It took me 12 hours round trip. I paid $90 in gas, and was so wired from the stress of hauling that lamp that I couldn't sleep for a day. But something clicked. After that, I started actively seeking out similar gigs. I didn't have a company name, just went by Dan with a truck, and left my number with local antique stores, estate sale companies, and auction houses. My big break came when an antique shop owner in Columbus referred me to an online estate sale platform that needed white-glove delivery for their more fragile goods. They wanted reliability, care, and someone who wouldn't dump a 19th-century armchair at a doorstep and bolt. That's how I landed a steady contract, and with it, the need to get serious. I created a logo on Canva, started a Facebook page, and registered my business as Heritage Hall Logistics. With more business came the need for better equipment. I took out a small loan, bought a used Sprinter van, hired my cousin who was tired of his warehouse job, and taught ourselves how to properly pack everything from chandeliers to Steinway pianos. We watched YouTube videos, read manuals, even talked to retired freight handlers. Business picked up in 2021. People had stuff to sell and ship, and we were weirdly poised to fill a niche that most logistics companies didn't bother with. We weren't the cheapest, but we were careful. And in the antique world, that mattered more. By mid-2022, we were moving more than just antiques. We started getting requests from art galleries, museum exhibit swaps, and one really bizarre gig involving a taxidermy moose being sent to a lodge in Vermont. We had to turn down jobs we couldn't handle, especially ones needing climate-controlled transit, but I started sketching ideas for how we could grow. I didn't want to overextend. We didn't have investors or a board, just grit, duct tape, and a growing Rolodex of clients who liked our hustle. The real turning point came when I got a call from someone working with a high-end furniture restoration company in New York. They wanted to test us on a pickup from Chicago to deliver to a private buyer in Manhattan. This wasn't just logistics, it was trust. We handled it flawlessly. After that, they gave us more work. We were now doing routes from the Midwest to the East Coast twice a month. I hired another driver, invested in a GPS fleet tracker, and learned to navigate DOT regulations the hard way when we got pulled over and fined in Pennsylvania for being over the legal weight limit on a load of marble columns. By 2023, I had 5 employees, 2 vans, and a rented warehouse space in Dayton. I still hadn't taken a proper vacation. My girlfriend, now fiancée, begged me to delegate more, and after a mild stress-induced panic attack on the side of I-70, I listened. I brought on a part-time operations manager, automated our scheduling and invoicing systems with some off-the-shelf software, and finally learned to sleep at night without worrying that someone had smashed a rare stained glass window during transit. We've now moved over 2,000 specialty items, ranging from fragile chandeliers to ancient Greek pottery, and the repeat clients keep us afloat even when the economy wobbles. Our biggest competitor is probably FedEx's freight service, but they don't hold your hand or text you updates when you're worried about grandma's heirloom cabinet. A year ago, I finally started paying myself a real salary $65,000, not wild money. But considering I was living off pizza coupons 3 years ago, it felt like a miracle. We're about to lease a bigger warehouse. I'm considering buying a box truck and maybe, just maybe, applying for a proper business grant to expand. I've made mistakes tons. One time we cracked a 200-year-old mirror, and I thought that would be the end of us. But I made the client whole, didn't dodge their calls, and they actually hired us again 6 months later. This isn't a unicorn story. I didn't invent an app. I don't have a viral TED Talk. I just found a weird little gap in the market and filled it with hustle, patience, and an obsessive fear of scratching valuable wood. So yeah, if you've got a dream and a reliable truck, don't wait for someone to give you permission. Just start hauling. You'd be surprised what you can build out of bubble wrap and blind faith. About 5 years ago, I was working in a windowless basement office for a mid-sized marketing firm, clocking in 60 hours a week to keep my boss's ego inflated and my rent paid. The money wasn't terrible, but it wasn't good enough to justify the lack of sunlight and soil erosion. I had a degree in business administration, a student loan balance that could fund a small war, and a creeping realization that I wasn't cut out to build someone else's dream for the next 40 years. The trigger came from a vending machine. I was staying late one night, trying to salvage a pitch for a client that didn't know what they wanted. I went to the vending machine to grab a snack. Everything was either stale, full of sugar, or some weird protein bar that tasted like drywall. In a moment of frustration, I half-joked to a coworker that someone should make a vending machine with actually good food, something fresh, local, and healthy. It stuck with me. That night, I didn't finish the pitch deck. Instead, I made a spreadsheet of local food vendors and another with vending machine suppliers. The next week, I ran numbers. The following month, I started calling around under the name Fresh Drop. The idea was simple: vending machines that sold fresh meals and snacks from local producers, wraps, salads, cold brews, fruit cups. Everything sourced within 50 miles. I figured if people could get decent meals on the go at airports and co-working spaces, they'd pay for quality. Of course, nothing's ever that simple. My first mistake: I bought a refurbished vending machine from a warehouse 2 states over. It arrived rusted, glitchy, and smelled faintly of mold. I spent more time watching YouTube repair videos than talking to vendors. I ended up gutting the machine and rebuilding it with the help of an electrician friend who charged me in beer and promised equity. Mistake number 2. I underestimated how picky health departments can be. Fresh food? In a machine? I might as well have said I was launching a sushi drone delivery service. The regulations nearly killed the entire idea. I had to get a food handler's license, install temperature sensors with live tracking, and work with an approved commercial kitchen. I maxed out 2 credit cards just getting the permits and safety certifications right. But the concept had legs. I got my first machine into a trendy co-working space downtown. Rent was low because the manager loved the concept and wanted to support young innovators. I stocked it with sandwiches from a local deli, kombucha from a hipster brewery, and these ridiculous vegan brownies that cost $$ for a piece wholesale. I sold out the first week. Month 2, I installed a second machine in a boutique gym. This one didn't go as well. The clientele was high-end, but they didn't trust food from a machine, no matter how fresh. I had to do taste test demos outside the machine just to build credibility. I stood in a branded t-shirt next to a cooler and handed out free samples like I was running for local office. By year 2, I had 6 machines. I was breaking even and making about as much as I had in my old job, but I was exhausted. Managing inventory, restocking, handling spoilage, answering support calls when the card reader went down, all of it fell on me. I learned how to talk down angry customers, sweet-talk health inspectors, and find workarounds when a vendor dropped out last minute. Then came COVID. Every machine was in a space that shut down or saw foot traffic plummet to near zero. I was staring at months of food waste, unpaid invoices, and a business that felt like it was collapsing in real time. I remember sitting in my one-bedroom apartment, surrounded by plastic containers of unsold hummus, wondering if I should just sell the machines for scrap. But the pandemic taught me to pivot. People still wanted fresh food, just not in shared spaces. I turned Fresh Drop into a delivery service. The model shifted overnight. Instead of vending machines, I created fresh crates, cooler boxes filled with weekly rotating meals from my vendor network. Subscriptions started small, 10 customers, mostly friends and family. But I'd already built a backend for sourcing, storage, and food safety. With some tweaking, I could make deliveries work. I rented a small commercial space, turned it into a prep and packaging facility, and hired a part-time driver. I reinvested everything I had, built a new website with pre-order functionality, and started marketing to local Facebook groups and Reddit subs. The pivot saved me. By mid-2021, Fresh Drop had 150 active subscribers, 2 drivers, and 0 vending machines left. The delivery model was profitable, and it was scalable. Fast forward to today, Fresh Drop has grown into a regional meal subscription service operating in 3 cities. We partner with over 40 local food producers and employ 12 full-time staff. We deliver over 3,000 meals a week, and churn is low because our customers know the food is made locally, supports real people, and actually tastes good. Last year, we hit $1.2 million in revenue with a 15% margin. We're not a unicorn, but I'm finally paying myself a real salary and paid off my student loans. More importantly, I don't dread Mondays anymore. Lessons? Plenty. 1. You don't need a revolutionary idea, just a pain point and persistence. 2. Learn enough to be dangerous in every part of your business: marketing, logistics, tech, legal. 3. If your first model breaks, pivot fast. Nothing kills a business faster than emotional attachment to a bad plan. 4. Ask for help before you're desperate. People love helping scrappy founders if you're honest and clear. 5. Stay small before you go big. Each early mistake costs less when you're still learning. Would I do it again? Probably, but not in vending machines. Funny enough, the original vending machine that started it all now sits in our warehouse. It's been painted Fresh Drop green and filled with fake food. We use it for team photos and as a reminder, sometimes the worst parts of your story make the best foundation for something better. I never thought selling wooden puzzles out of my garage would turn into a $3.4 million a year business, but here we are. The craziest part? It all started with a broken printer and a botched Amazon return. It was early 2020, just before COVID hit hard. I was working a dead-end IT support job at a medium-sized firm in Indiana. My day was a slog of troubleshooting printer issues, resetting passwords for people who couldn't remember them 5 minutes later, and answering the same dumb questions over and over. I wasn't miserable, but I wasn't thriving. You know that vague dissatisfaction that just lingers in your gut? That was me, every single day. One day, my boss handed me a box, an old 3D printer from the office that had stopped working, and said, "If you can fix this, it's yours." I'd always liked tinkering, so I took it home and spent a weekend breathing life back into it. Once it was up and running, I started messing around with small models, then graduated to printing parts for a model car project. But what really caught my attention was a YouTube video I randomly stumbled across. A guy was making intricate wooden puzzles using laser cutters and 3D printers. I was intrigued, to say the least. I'd always been a sucker for jigsaw puzzles growing up, especially the ones that made you think. I started researching wooden puzzle designs, mechanical puzzles, or puzzles, interlocking geometric ones. I learned about CAD, laser cutting techniques, and different types of wood that worked best for fine detail. I didn't have a laser cutter, but I could prototype parts with my 3D printer. I spent the next 2 months building a few rough designs. I had zero artistic background, but I was obsessive about functionality. I posted a couple of photos to Instagram and Reddit under a throwaway username. Within a few days, someone DM'd me asking where they could buy one. That's when the light bulb went off. Maybe this wasn't just a hobby. I dropped $2, 800, pretty much all of my savings, on a budget laser cutter from eBay. It arrived 2 weeks later, loud and smelling vaguely like burnt plastic every time I ran it. I turned my garage into a makeshift workshop. I worked my IT job during the day, and from 6 p.m. until midnight I was cutting, sanding, assembling, and packaging wooden puzzles. I set up a basic Shopify store, added 6 products, and called the brand Interlock Lab. I picked the name because it sounded kind of techy, but also hinted at the puzzle's nature. My marketing strategy was simple. Take cool photos, post to puzzle and woodworking subreddits, and respond to every comment like my life depended on it. I made my first sale in June 2020. A guy in Vermont bought a spiral puzzle cube for $35. I remember doing a little dance in the garage. The next day, I got 2 more orders. Then 5. By the end of the month, I'd made $200 in revenue. Not profit, but still, it was intoxicating. I reinvested everything. Better wood, better packaging. I spent hours on Reddit reading what people liked and hated about premium puzzle brands. I incorporated every bit of feedback into my next batch. By October, I was making around $4,000/month in revenue and working 80-hour weeks. My wife thought I was losing it. She wasn't wrong. In November 2020, I took a leap. I emailed a well-known YouTuber who reviewed puzzles and woodworking gadgets. I offered to send a few pieces for free. To my shock, he replied 2 hours later and said, "Sure, why not?" He posted a 10-minute review in December. Overnight, my store exploded. I woke up to 486 orders in the queue. My Stripe balance went from $118 to $27 for 60 in 3 days. I couldn't keep up. I begged 2 of my friends from college, both between jobs, to come help. I turned our basement into another production space. We started operating in shifts. I streamlined the design process, outsourced laser cutting to a local shop, and kept assembly in-house to save money. We hit $240,000 in sales that quarter. 2021 was insane. I quit my job in March and officially registered the business as an LLC. We expanded to 20 products. I hired 2 full-time employees and a freelance designer from Romania who was a whiz with complex geometry. We launched limited edition drops that sold out in minutes. At one point, we had a 3-month wait list. But then I hit a wall. I got cocky and tried to expand into the high-end puzzle collector market. I commissioned a $10,000 titanium puzzle prototype. It was a disaster. Nobody wanted it. I also overordered packaging from China, $35,000 worth, and half of it was misprinted and useless. I learned the hard way about quality control and managing inventory. Worse, one of our viral videos got flagged for copyright music, a dumb oversight, and our ad account was frozen for weeks. Sales dipped hard. I had to lay off 1 employee and pull back on everything. That low point forced me to rethink the business. I'd grown too fast and let hype drive decisions instead of data. I got back to basics, listened to customers, doubled down on our best sellers, and stopped chasing trends. By mid-2022, we were back on track. We hit $1.3 million in annual revenue with a clean 22% profit margin. By the end of 2023, that number was $2.8 million. We crossed $3.4 million last year, and I still operate from the same garage, though now it's connected to a small warehouse, and we have 11 employees. People think puzzle making is some quirky side hustle, but niche markets, when done right, are gold mines. Our customers are collectors, engineers, and people who love solving things. It's not a commodity product, it's a personal experience. And here's the kicker. I still hand-assemble 1 puzzle a week. I don't need to, but it reminds me where I started, fixing a busted printer on a Friday night with no idea what was coming next. If you're stuck in a job that drains you, just start building something. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be yours. I was never the kind of person who thought I'd end up being an entrepreneur. I was raised in a small town in the Midwest where everyone knew everyone's business, and your chances of going big were slim to none. My family was working class. We didn't have much beyond what we earned every day. My parents were good people, but neither of them had the kind of ambition that would lead to any kind of wealth or business ownership. They were content with their jobs and their lives, and I used to think that's how it was for most people. But somewhere deep inside me, I knew that wasn't the life I wanted. Even though I didn't have any role models, I started dreaming about starting my own business. I didn't know exactly what kind of business it would be, but I just knew that I couldn't stay in the same small town forever, working a 9-to-5 job with no real prospects of growth. The first few years after high school were a blur. I moved to the city to go to college, partly because I wanted the education, but mostly because I needed to get out. I worked part-time jobs to make ends meet, ranging from waitressing to working at a local retail store. Every night, I'd sit at my desk, looking up business ideas online, hoping to stumble across something that made sense. It wasn't until my third year of college that I found my first idea. One late night, as I was scrolling through Reddit, I came across a thread about how people were making money by flipping old furniture. Someone was talking about buying worn-out or vintage furniture from thrift stores and reselling it after giving it a bit of love, restoring it, repainting it, reupholstering it. They were making good profits. I had zero experience with furniture restoration, but the idea stuck with me. I didn't have much money to start with, so I took a small loan from a relative and used it to buy a few pieces of old furniture. I found a few chairs and a coffee table at a local flea market that looked like they had potential. The furniture was cheap, but in bad shape, scratches, chipped paint, and stained cushions. But something clicked in my head. I figured that if I could fix them up and make them look new, I could sell them for a profit. I didn't know what I was doing at first, but I got a few basic tools and watched YouTube videos to figure out how to sand down wood, repaint surfaces, and reupholster chairs. It took forever, and it wasn't always perfect, but I managed to get the first pieces into somewhat presentable condition. I posted pictures of the restored pieces on Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace, and within a few days, I had my first sale. The feeling of making that first sale was incredible. It wasn't much, only a couple $100, but it felt like I had unlocked some kind of magic. I realized that there was a market for restored furniture, and that I didn't need a massive budget to get started. As I continued to work on flipping furniture, I began learning more about the business side of things. I started tracking my expenses, setting a budget for each project, and figuring out how to price the pieces to ensure I was making a profit. I also started reaching out to local thrift stores and asking if they had any pieces that were sitting around gathering dust. I'd offer to buy them at a discount and restore them for resale. In the beginning, it was slow. I was still in college, working part-time jobs, and trying to balance everything. But little by little, my side hustle grew. I started making a name for myself in the local community, and soon people were reaching out to me with old furniture they wanted to sell. By the time I graduated, I had built a small but steady income from flipping furniture. But I wasn't content. I wanted more. I wanted to scale this business into something bigger. I decided to focus on creating a website where I could showcase my furniture pieces, and eventually, I'd expand into offering services like custom restoration and upcycling for clients. But there was a problem. I didn't know anything about web design. I spent weeks learning the basics of website development. I enrolled in a couple of online courses, watched tutorials on YouTube, and just threw myself into it. After months of trial and error, I finally had a functional website. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. I also started paying more attention to social media marketing, building a following on Instagram and Facebook. I posted before and after photos of my furniture pieces, shared restoration tips, and connected with people in the design and DIY communities. The response was overwhelming. People were fascinated by the transformation of old, worn-out furniture into something fresh and beautiful. As I gained followers, I began offering tips and tutorials on how to restore furniture yourself. I posted step-by-step guides and answered questions from people who wanted to try their hand at upcycling. This not only grew my social media presence but also built credibility for my brand. Eventually, my business began to take off. I was selling more pieces, and I had a steady stream of clients who were looking for custom restoration work. But the real game changer came when I realized that I could combine my passion for furniture restoration with e-commerce. I began sourcing high-quality, vintage furniture from thrift stores across the country and selling them directly on my website. I also created an online course teaching others how to restore furniture, which became another source of revenue. In just a few years, I went from flipping furniture in my spare time to running a full-fledged business with a team of employees. Looking back, I realized that what started as a small idea, flipping a few pieces of furniture turned into a multi-million-dollar business. I didn't have a business degree, nor did I come from a wealthy background, but I had drive, creativity, and a willingness to learn. And while my journey has been far from easy, it's been one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. I've learned more about myself, business, and perseverance than I ever could have imagined. Now, I have a warehouse full of furniture, an online store, and a team that helps me run the business. We've expanded beyond just furniture and into home decor, offering everything from custom upholstery to home renovation consulting. I still get messages from people who want to know how I made it. And the one piece of advice I always give them is this: don't wait for the perfect moment. There will never be a perfect time to start. The most important thing is to just begin. There were plenty of times when I thought I was going to fail. I spent months losing money on bad projects, and there were times when I wondered if it was all worth it. But I kept going, and that persistence is what ultimately made the difference. My story is proof that you don't have to come from money or have a fancy degree to start a successful business. You just need a passion, a willingness to learn, and the guts to keep pushing forward. So if you're out there, dreaming of your own business, don't wait for everything to fall into place. Start today. You might surprise yourself with what you can accomplish. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.